Hello again, and welcome back to the Ether. I am Ether, at it again with another speed draw slash paint video, back in the fandom space. The recent story obsession that I've been having, outside of Star Strike Rich, is also the trash anime. Like, literally, it's partly about trash. It's Gachiakuta. So, using this world as the jumping off point, I'm going to make another character design. Let's start with the name. I named her Sade. Like the amazing singer, yes, I'm a fan. Initially, the only reason I chose it was because it's pretty and I liked the name. But then I learned the meaning of the name. It means honor holds the crown. Now, I ain't no mother, and I don't plan on being no mother anytime soon. But geez, what a beautiful name to give to a kid. And it made me think about parenthood and how our upbringing influences who we are. I thought about how, in the world of Gachiakuta, it seems really, really hard to raise a child well in that world. I mean, at every turn in the story, there's trash beasts, classism. Shoot, a child is getting abused or abandoned or trafficked at almost every turn when they're alone. I am genuinely hoping nothing happens to Deer or Remlin or that kaiju monster girl. Protect the children. And so, the world of Gachiakuta may be super cool in how it portrays its world, but it definitely doesn't stray away from the darker elements. Clearly, the characters on the ground have had to learn to adapt and find some sense of normalcy. But to a kid, oh Jeebus, what would a person have to do to even survive childhood in that world? I mean, hell, even on Earth as it stands. That being said, it brings me back to my initial thought. How does one rear children in this world? So as I let my mind wander, I envisioned that just like a lot of individuals, Sade probably didn't come from money. I briefly toyed with the idea of having her basically grow up alone. But what if she didn't? What if she had one good parent who really freaking tried to support her kid? A parent who worked so many odd jobs just to keep food on the table, kept her daughter inside often because they lived in an affordable and yet sketchy neighborhood on the ground, spent her precious little time with Sade. I imagine that this woman would sing to her and paint her nails, affirm her by having Sade look into her own reflection. Little compact with a mirror, she would affirm to her daughter that, Sade, you are brave and beautiful. I think that Sade's mother would have been her closest confidant. And just like in real life, finances affected how they lived. Humble, but with no savings. They couldn't afford an emergency, so of course, that's when an emergency happens. Sade's mother kept working and grew sicker. Sade not having the heart to sit and watch her mother wither away. She went out into the world and tried to take care of the only person who ever took care of her. A reserved, quiet child went and panhandled. Outside of that, she scavenged for food, cooked for her mom, sat by her bedside, and did all that until the very end. And what's a kid to do on their own? The answer is just survive, so that's what Sade did. She took to the streets with a heavy heart, memories of her mother, and her mother's old compact. Which brings me to designing the compact that would become Sade's vital instrument. So I had no clue how to make a compact, so I had to find some reference images of old antiques. I wanted the classic circular shape, and plus it's easier to draw, but the references I nabbed had cool little caveats that I hadn't considered before. I liked the pretty decorated cases. I think the ridges around one of them was very neat because the ridges itself, because they looked like flower petals. I thought, hey, well, Sade's last name is Yarrow, and I chose Yarrow because it was the name of a flower, and I really liked I really liked flowers and I was learning herbalism, so I was like, yeah, yarrow would be a nice last name. Add that flower motif of yarrow flowers onto the design of the compact. Or connecting the dots. Then there's the activated vital instrument. So I pulled clips of Gachiakuta characters activating their own weapons. There were similar patterns across the board. The items would become more pristine, the objects expanded, they get that cool glow that mimics their eye color, and all in all, the item just becomes way more battle ready and so cool. So I tried to amplify Sade's compact in the same way when her compact was activated. There we have Sade Yaro's vital instrument, activated and unactivated, deactivated, deactivated. Words. With that being done and taken care of, it's time to move from the vital instrument to the wielder of said instrument. Okay, so not gonna lie, I struggled for a while figuring out what else to do for this character. I mean, after a general upbringing. I loved Canvas Town, and there's a part of me that absolutely wanted to make an art-based cleaner. However, my mind kept wandering, and it didn't stay on that idea for long. Besides, Remlin is a fantastic example of an art-based giver. Then, because I've been interested in herbalism, I was thinking about a herb-based cleaner, and then I realized, well, canonically, flowers are a rarity in the polluted wasteland of the ground, which means cultivating plants to make herb-based products would probably be really hard and maybe not the most common skill for a groundling, so it felt all too convoluted, so I kept trying. With some brainstorming that led nowhere initially, I decided to give my noggin a break and do some YouTube perusing. One of my favorite YouTubers, Foreign Man, Foreign Land, appeared, and so I decided to binge watch some of his content. Then I found even more channels very similar to his, and then I ended up finding two really great videos about sex workers. One was by a group called the Queer Collective, and they interviewed a sex worker who was an activist. And then the other was by a Black woman, and I hope I say this right, I don't know if I will. Her screen name is There's Lee. Crap. I'll just put it on the screen. um, Anyways, she was talking about sex work as it interacted and intersected with feminism. So it was very interesting to learn about this topic because for me, I often conflated sex work with sexual abuse, which I learned right off the bat while I was doing some research and watching those videos, that sex trafficking, though it can be conflated with sex work, it is not the same thing. More so, what else I was thinking about from my own perspective was the danger that surrounded sex workers. And then I learned that a lot of that danger from the job comes from it being very unprotected. And let's face it, it's unprotected because it's labeled as something impure and wrong in the eyes of a country, America, that has been founded on sexism, misogyny, racism, that's shrouded in purity culture. Me, as I reflect on this information, I come to the conclusion that a job is a job, and in my mind, if you're providing a service that is consented to and isn't harming anyone, then you don't deserve a dehumanizing environment. No one who works a hard job deserves a dehumanizing environment. Plus, so long as a sex worker made an individual choice of their own volition without being pressured or abused, then what's wrong with the purchasing of bodily desires or using your body for money? I mean, shoot, people do manual labor all the time, and people aren't calling landscaper sluts unless you have a kink. I don't want to know about it. That whole tangent being said, rubber up or no nut. God, why would you say that? Be safe. Use condoms. Use sexual protection. Don't have babies if you're not ready for babies. And in general, be careful when using your body for any kind of manual labor. Tangent aside, what I'm really getting at here is I decided that I was gonna make my character a sex worker. Because why not? It is one of the most enduring types of work, and I think it would still absolutely be applicable to the survival of an individual in the world of Gachiakuta. I mean, shoot. Semu is literally reading erotica in her first introduction. Come on. Last we left off with Sade. She had taken to the streets. At 16, she was just surviving, rummaging through garbage for anything worth salvaging. A madam found her, and Sade was skittish, but the madam asked if Sade was hungry. Sade, of course, her stomach was rumbling. When the offer was put out there, she tentatively took it. Madam asked if Sade needed a job. Sade didn't answer at the time, and after eating and bidding the woman goodbye, she was curious, so she tailed her, followed her all the way to the job she spoke of. However, that's when she was discovered. Madam had found her hiding around a corner, and Sade was terrified because they had gotten far enough that she had found where they were going, and it was a brothel. The 16-year-old feared the worst. She was about to be trafficked, about to be sold, made to dance like a doll on strings, and she needed to get the frick out of there. And then the madam handed her an apron and a ladle and basically said, in exchange for food and board, all you have to do is help me clean up and cook around this place. You want the job? And, well, Sade took the job. She worked closely with the madam, cleaning and cooking. She was probably about, I'd say, 19. She began to admire the working women and the femmes at the brothel, and she thought that they were beautiful, and she couldn't help but notice that they made a good chunk of change. And she wanted more funds so that she could do things, and she missed getting all dolled up with her mother, missed painting her nails, and missed feeling beautiful. The time she had gotten her words together, one day while doing the laundry with the madam, she kind of blurted out, "Do you think I could do what the working gals do?" And it was awkward. And because Sade kept wondering about it, that youthful persistence, the madam eventually relented and decided to at least show her the ropes. Years passed, and she got better at dancing and bringing clients to her, beckoning them to her. Now, because some people feel entitled to another person's body, there were people who would come into the brothel that were less than savory. The madam was aging, and she couldn't fend for the girls like she used to. And Sade, she hated the way these weirdos would come into the brothel and belittle her and her peers. They were still people after all. And these clients were coming for them, so why didn't they treat them with more respect? Didn't feel right. She wished there was more she could do to help keep them all safe. And in her earnest desire to protect her peers, that's when her old inherited compact became her vital instrument. Sade went from brothel cleaner to dancer to a bouncer. She even asked the madam if it were possible for them to hire more security to keep them all safer outside of just herself. And, they needed to hire trustworthy people, and the madam took it seriously, and she started holding interviews, found some reliable folks with integrity. Things slowly got better at the brothel. It kind of turned into a best little whorehouse in Texas type vibe. And the more Sade used her compact, the more she learned how to wield it better. The compact would turn the viewer's reflection against them. If you held any anger or grief or insecurity in your heart, your reflection would reach out from the mirror world and kick your ass. Effectively, Sade could make doppelgangers at will, and they would fight for her. Those doppelgangers are incredibly and were incredibly persistent and incredibly focused. Sade has only ever discovered two ways to stop the doppelgangers, and she's not immune to her own abilities. Her own reflection has hurt her before. Very non-discriminate tool. she turns 26. Things at the brothel are good. The girls and the madam are safe, and she's thinking so much has changed. And she thought about her own future for the first time in years, about how her life could change again, and how would it change. And it's not like she wants to be in the brothel forever. Like, it's not been bad to her, but she realized she didn't want to stay there forever. And with this in her mind, one day she goes a walking, goes out and buys some nice things for her peers and for the madam. Some perfume, some makeup, some ciggies, you know. And she runs into Dear Santa, who got separated from Bro. And without hesitation, she goes right up to him and asks if he needs help. And she helps Santa find Bro. However, while she's doing this, a lecturous person tried to get handsy with her. It was frickin' slimy, because who does that in front of a kid? She put that person in check with her vital instrument. Bro, who was also looking for Dear Santa at the same time, caught them both just in time for him to see that she was a giver, and she was doing her best to also help someone he cared for. And so that became her into joining the cleaners, and that's how she started her new life as a cleaner. Obviously, I imagine she said her goodbyes to the other brothel gals, said goodbye to the madam, made sure that they were all okay before she left, and there's no doubt in my mind that she would go and visit them. So with that being said, it's time to go into the elements of her design. So I cannot lie, coming up with the character origin and facets of her personality and what she'd gone through made designing her much easier. I kept her shapes very circular and soft. I think it's because when I talk about her or I think about her, I think about she's resilient, but she still has that sensitive, kid in her. I made a whole reference board for Black women, of which I thought were really pretty, that I thought their vibe would be good inspiration, and I found really cool protective styles. I liked the idea of treating her hair like a crown, so I really messed with the hair, had those gravity defying curls. The palette I had in mind was already earthy green and earth tones. Then I decided to add some gold tones to it to match the compact. And if she's a sex worker, woman of the night, was making some pretty decent money, she could and does deserve to buy herself some nice jewelry, so she got herself a little bit of gold. Then, as far as Gachiakuta, the general style is pretty urban, and they all wear lots of baggy clothes in that world, if not flat out more revealing clothes. So with those trends going in different directions, I wanted to try my hand at mimicking the baggier style, making her uniform more baggy, with the exception of showing off a little shoulders, showing off a little leg, and you get to see those holy jeggings, leggings underneath. There's a bit of sensuality to her uniform. It's not right out really trying to be, I guess, she's really trying to focus her energy on being a good cleaner, but she still maintains that aspect of her style that she got while she was working at the brothel, and so that also influenced how I designed her. And overall, I had a really good time just making this character and having fun with it. This is how she turned out. Yeah, and I had a lot of fun just doing this whole process and learning more about things I didn't know about and just being able to put that into a little character and get all this stuff that's in my brain out of my head. With all that said and done, it's time for me to wrap it up. If you're still here, dear viewer, thank you for coming to the abyss and humoring my little tirades. I appreciate you. Take care of yourself out there. May all the kindness that you put forth into the world abundantly return to you. All right. Bye.